Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We are committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and who are a force for good in the world. Today, our guest is Mr. Vonzel Sawyer. He has had quite a career. He is the CEO of Vonzel Sawyer Senior and Associates. He is an executive business and leadership coach. He's a business strategist with expertise in marketing and development. He is also the founder of the e-learning academy. He is a minister and pastor. Mr. Vonzel, welcome to the show today.
It's good to be here today with you, Stephen.
Wonderful. But let's get right into it. I've been thinking about your career and all of the things that you do. And I'm curious to know, as a pastor and as a coach, do you find those two things congruent or is there a difference in the two?
So I did what we call transitional pastoring, and what that means is there's normally what you have pastoring, then you have what we call interim pastoring. Well, there's something called transitional pastoring, and that is where normally if you are without a pastor, the church is seeking a pastor, so they'll put someone in place until they get that a new pastor. A transitional pastor is one where the church basically says, yeah, we need a new pastor, but we have some things going on and we really can't stop them right now. So we really need to choose someone who can keep things moving in a progressive direction before we get someone else involved. So they could be involved for 2, 3, 4, 5 years even before
Wow.
they decide on a new pastor. So that's what I did, and that was a lot of fun doing transitional pastoring. And and I don't do that now, although I still am an ordained minister in two different organizations. And so I find that it works together really, really well because churches being more business in many cases, only because of the fact that they have to work with the federal government and work with the state that they're in, we find that you have to have an understanding of the administration and organization and the communication in the organization. And you have to have an understanding of scripture as well and theology and such things like that. The problem comes in is when you have a great theological mind, you have a great ability to teach, but you have no understanding of what it takes to do the administrative side. So it tends to bog down everything else you're doing. So I find that the two work together really, really, really well. And if you think about if you're talking about the Christian faith, which is based upon the Jewish traditions, one of the things that in the Jewish traditions they did in the temple when they had what they call animal sacrifice is they had what we called a market at the temple so that people wouldn't have to bring everything they come to Jerusalem with the sacrifice. So they had a market. Well, that market had to be treated with integrity and fairness. And of course, you know the story and the Gospels of Jesus whipping people out of the temple. That had nothing to do with the fact that they were selling there. It had to do with they were cheating people.
Okay.
So being integral and doing business is a great portion of how you show people your true faith when it comes to money.
Well, look, I'm glad you cleared that up. I was not aware of what you just said about people cheating in the temple, and that's what upset Jesus. That's good to know. So, and I can imagine, and you just said it, but I want you to put some emphasis on it, is that one could be a great orator in a church, but if they don't understand business, that the lights may not stay on in that institution. Is that about right?
Yeah, not only do the lights not stay on, you can't even be the catalyst for inviting others who may have that understanding of administration and things to help you. Even if you don't know it yourself, you still have to have the capacity for understanding how those who do would help in a church to keep it moving on as a concern. Think about it. One of the biggest things that we ask for in church is people's money and their time. And you think about that. That's money that they've worked hard for. Would they not expect you to have some type of fiduciary responsibility to take care of the assets that they help put together and aggregate in one place? It would be the worst thing in the world to say, trust me, and yet I don't have the studies or the ability to bring along those who do study about how to make that more secure and better and increase.
Right. Okay. So along those lines, I'm thinking about how do you help, the leader of an organization, be it, let's say, a college president or the head of a church, achieve their goals. And I'm seeing this a little differently in my mind as I talk to you about this. Because a pastor could say, "Look, I answer to God," and then of course, the leader of an institution like a university may be open to certain messages. So, how do you help? How do you work with these two different types of individuals,
Yeah.
pastor, yeah, church organist, or leader of a university?
Yeah, so if we're so that's a great point that you bring up because we've had experience in both, and whether we're talking about there's two things that happen in any organization, whether it's a university, a church, a Fortune 500 company, or a startup, and that is this communication. Everything is about the ability to mobilize people toward a focused work through communication. And so when we talk with pastors, many times they're saying, I I I do answer to the Lord. So let's talk about that answering to the Lord. The answer to the Lord was feed my sheep. Well, you can't feed them if you can't afford to feed. You can't shelter them unless you can afford a place for them to stay. You can't do the things that are necessary for, and what he meant by feeding was basically take care of them, grow them, help them, make sure they're healthy. How can you do that without understanding the land which you were in? Okay, so whether I'm here in the United States or I'm in another country, I have to observe the rules and laws of that land for us to continue being what? Healthy, for us to continue moving forward. So when we talk to pastors, we talk about, okay, is your church set up correctly? Are you sticking with the rules of the land? Because one of the things that the Bible talks about very clearly is about being able to follow peace with all men, sticking to the rules of a place as long as they don't conflict with the rules of God. And that's from a value perspective. But we have allegiance to a country that we live in. We have allegiance to its constitutions and things like that. So how do we do that and put that together? One thing is understanding how business gets done. So it may be a deacon, it may be an administrator or someone like that, but we talk to the pastor about what are the things you need to do so you can continue being involved with community, your neighborhood, your state, and such things as that. And that gets very heavily into how do you handle value, money, assets, things like that. So we
Right.
talk to them about that because if you don't, I even tell them, if you neglect this in your own household, you won't just not have a church, you won't have a home.
I see. Look, many of the people who see my podcast come from a Christian background. Not all of them, but many of them. So I'm going to stay with this. So bear with me just a little bit longer.
Sure.
So what can, let's say, a board of trustees or deacon board, if it were to pressure you and say, well, what can you offer our pastor that he, in most cases, or she, did not get from seminary? Well, how would you respond to that?
I said what you mainly need to understand is the political and economic environment that you live in. Number one, you have to have an impact to your community. You can't have an impact to your community unless you understand the politics of it, where the city is going, where the county is going. You can't understand how to impact the people of that community to, as we say, win them to Christ. Well, you can't win them to Christ when I still have huge drug addictions, when I have huge trauma in my life, when I can't eat, when I can't do those things. How do you work with the system in a way that gives us those things so we can truly trust you to hear your message about what you have to say? So, one of the things we really do is we say, okay, let's look at where you are. Let's look at geographically where you are. The question is, if you are a church, do you have an impact to the community you're in? And how do you have that impact? And so when you start to work with the politicians, when you start working with the bureaucrats in government, do you have an incorporation of your nonprofit? Have you gone to the federal government and looked for a 501c3 so that you're exempt from taxes? So people that give to you can trust that they have the advantage of taking that charitable amount off of their taxes. Do you have an ability in a system for how you count the money in a way that's integral. So when you make a report to your church, they understand these things. So we look at things like fiduciary responsibility, integrity. We look at boards. Most of the churches that have boards, there's procedures to boards. There's legal responsibility to boards. There's fiduciary responsibility to boards. Then there is just what we call the attitude of care about everyone. So there's board training. There is how do we create more actual businesses, help people in those businesses. People look at financial literacy. That's great. But why aren't we doing that as a practice in our church? So the more healthier the households are in the church, that's the healthier the church can become. And all that has to do with business, but it comes down to this. It really has to do with love. Love says, I take the harder road to make sure our love is truly branded to you and how we give it to you. And that all gets back to that. We think love is about feeling warm and secure and all that. Yeah, but there's a cost to that
Mhm.
called study. There's a cost to that called diligence and practice of things that you do every day. So why? So those become the bedrock of a foundation of what we call true love. And that's what one of the scriptures says, that a man that loves his family gives an inheritance
Yeah,
to his grandchildren and everything. Well, how do you give an inheritance unless you know how to build it?
yeah.
You have to have that. So the ultimate sign of love is actually taking care of the business of the church as well.
That's great. And I've got to probe this a little deeper here because you mentioned some key words for me. One is love, and the other one was, it sounded like duty of care. And I think you also mentioned the word trauma. Now, I'm not trying to pull these out of context for you, but what I want to say is simply this and ask you really, when a church door opens, you got a lot of people walking in there.
Mhm.
So does the church have a responsibility to be aware of people who may be experiencing, let's say emotional pain, trauma from the past? And is it sufficient to just say that God will take care of it?
Yeah, I think it is efficient to say God will take care of it. The question that we have to ask after that is, how will he take care of that? And he says, okay, so I've given you all the ability to think, the ability to have will, the ability to work.
Mhm.
So the question is, will you do the work necessary to truly take care of people? What does that mean? That means that yes, I have as a pastor counseled people when it came to spiritual counsel, but I also saw when something was a behavioral situation from trauma and said, okay, let me find now a Christian clinical psychologist or therapist who can help other people otherwise. So what does that mean? That means if there's trauma in a place, when people have been impacted that type of way, that I said, okay, this is what we call a social ill here.
Mhm.
And one of the things that Jesus did is the Bible talks about he went about healing those with diseases. Well, he was healing the social ills, and that's what he was doing. So, what about some of our money? Maybe some of our money shouldn't go to just food. Maybe it shouldn't just go to food pantries and clothing and things like that. How about we build a fund also so that we have therapists that can help people, because the pastor really isn't a therapist. They're there representing God, but they're supposed to be representing the holistic side of saying, I can't do it all by myself. I need other people to help who
Wow.
have studied these types of things, been in practice, and understand what is best for people. When the Israel was in the wilderness, and after they came out and they were building the Ark of the Tabernacle and things like that, Moses had to go to people who had different skill sets to be able to bring and fashion gold and fashion metal and things like that. He didn't do that himself. He found people who were good at that, and that's part of what a pastor and a leadership and a board should be doing, is looking for not the who's the Superman who does all things in one, but no, how do we create community by finding those people that have a bent towards certain things, and a bent meaning they seem to have a heart and a spirit and a passion and a mind towards certain areas, like mathematics, like love, like caring for, and things like that. And then integrate them into the system so that they are able to work to help with trauma and such things as that. So the church should be a place where trauma is taken care of. The problem that occurs in many times because we don't have these setups and understand these things and set them up as foundations. The result is that sometimes we re-traumatize those who have been under trauma already. And I don't think it's done intentionally. I think it's done just because we there's a certain amount of ignorance and not understanding how we must allow community and church community to have certain what we would call expertise among us to be able to do some things.
Yeah, I mean, I recall you mentioned Moses. I think it was Moses' father-in-law who advised him to get some men who could be his support. So that's a good point. Yeah. So I can see now from listening to you whereby a pastor or any church leader could benefit from talking with someone like yourself. So that's for sure. I want to look more closer now at business. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
start, I come from education. And one of the things that I noticed in my last place of employment in particular was that my institution had ventures with corporations. I'll give you two examples. I want you to comment on this because what they did with, I think it was Nissan, they had Nissan to give faculty and staff a discount if they bought Nissan products. And then Nissan then was able to email faculty about their new automobiles. The second thing I saw was AT&T, the telecom company, was able to give us a certain percentage off if you go. And they emailed us. Is this unusual to see these kinds of ventures between organizations and corporations?
It's been going on for a long time among corporations in business to be able to market their services to a particular group of people. There are certain things that the organizations look at. One, it's great branding, meaning it's a great image to help those who are helping our greater society in their higher education and supporting those who do so. So that's from a branding perspective. So that's just right. That's just good things to do. The other thing that happens is you out of the university faculty and presidents, you tend to have people who are into their careers for a good period of time. So from a fiscal standpoint, it just makes sense to deal with them because they're going to probably purchase, if we're talking about Nissan, they're probably going to purchase over their career maybe five or more cars. So it's better to work with them even with a discount because the longevity of the cash flow makes such a big difference. On the university side, it's important that the university says, okay, if you have a career with us, we're going to look for any advantage we can. And when we see something like this, we're going to invite that in. So it's really a win win situation. But Nissan really wins, and then those who need to get a better discount on their car win as well. So that coupling with public education, that coupling with private education and businesses make a lot of sense in those
Mhm.
cases.
I see. So those collaborations is really good business from your standpoint. Well, let me ask you another question about universities and colleges. Do you think it makes sense for alumni associations to look for opportunities for them to collaborate with a business or an organization that may help them? Or is this something only for like the actual institution? If you
No,
understand
I
my question, yeah.
Yeah, so I think so this is what I love about what I consider to be what I call power. The
Hmm.
power, the ability to mobilize any people toward a certain end. And I love that about when you said the alumni, not only just the institution of the school, but the alumni should look for whatever we can do to aggregate our skill sets and everything to cause it to be for something better. And by bringing together ourselves, we incur power where there was no power before. It seemed to be nothing there, but then two people, three people, five people get together that have a common experience and a common vision and say, "Let's do this." That is that's the truth of power. That ability to aggregate our thoughts, our work, and what we do to make things better. And every nonprofit that gets started, every group that gets started, whether in business or not in business, are attempting to do that. They're trying to aggregate power for a concern, whether it's taking care of the blind, whether it's taking care of those with disabilities, whether it's taking care of those that need water, or any of those things, whether it's an alumni group or parts of a university. It could be the class of so and so who comes out and does something. That's what I love about when people decide to get together and decide that what maybe isn't can become, and start moving in that way. And that's where business gets started. We begin to transact our power with each other toward a certain end.
You mentioned the word power. I got to ask you, is there power in an email list? Let's say that you are the director of alumni at an institution. You got several thousands of names and email addresses. Is that power?
So much power. Let me tell you the greatest power
Okay.
that they have. First of all, they have a common basis. Okay. When we have countries that do business with each other, what's one of the first things they have to get together? A translator. They need someone who can help them understand some commonality. And when you're using an email list of a group, the power in that is everybody has a space and a platform from which they all can agree with, regardless of background, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of those things. We all went to this school. So now we have a familiarity where otherwise we'd be in this weird conversation and we don't even know the first thing to talk about except the weather or the politics or something like that. But now we can talk about something we shared outside of what others shared. And having that now all in an email, we come when people approach us in that email and that power there, it's a shared experience that causes us to be able to do more, to trust more. And I always like to say this: if you want cash flow, you got to get trust flow. And
Yeah.
part of the power of people who are in common with each other is there's a flow of trust normally there that isn't there when strangers are talking to each other. I think it's actually essential to building trust over some time is where people don't have what I call friendship with each other, but they can have commerce.
Mm.
And that's really what the Silk Road used to be known for in the Asian countries. It was known that maybe we don't share everything, but the one thing we can share is trade. And that's what we was essentially talking about. And that's where two people don't have to have an affinity, but they have an affinity for survival.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And survival says even we may not see eye to eye in our culture and things like that, but we understand we have this commonality called life,
Right.
and we'd like to continue living it. So let's find out how we still can do things, though we may not culturally ever become altogether the same.
All right, got you. Okay. All right, so I want to talk more about businesses here. And we've touched upon this already. We know that leads, certainly a business needs leads. I don't care if you're General Motors selling cars, you need people to talk to. How do businesses generate leads? I mean, I know that you're the founder of, as you work with the e-learning academy, so I'm sure you have some insights here. Give us some ideas. How do businesses generate leads?
Yeah, and let me correct something. I'm not actually the founder of the eLearning Academy. I joined a group of other coaches that founded it together. So,
Gotcha.
and I want to make sure understand that. Although I love the Learning Academy, and it's really great that we can have input into it so that it works really well. But when we're talking about leads, leads are no more than the presentation of an audience that show an interest in something. That's nothing more. Leads aren't conversions. They're strictly a starting point to say, let's have a conversation. And one of the ways you find out about there are so many myriad of ways of finding leads. Everything from a handshake uh, with a stranger to a someone who has a problem and someone who advertises. We take care of that problem, and they connect. A lead happens when two groups connect, whether through an email list, whether through an advertisement, whether through a handshake or anything like that. So leads are basically where two people interact and have a common problem or pleasure situation which the other can accommodate in some type of way. And the simple ways of leads are referrals. The simple way of leads are websites that can have what we call SEO, and that's when they're trying to move up in their organic ability for people to eyeballs to see what they do. There are other ways of advertising with social media, advertising on billboards, advertising in newspapers. The other thing is just letting meeting groups of chambers, alumni groups, and others and saying what you do. But the key is finding an interest and not just being able to present to somebody, but a lead really comes from when somebody says, I may want that, I may need that, or it's of interest to me in the future to find out about that. And so people put on webinars and all types of things, and all these tend to generate leads. But the most wonderful way of generating leads is just meet somebody and talk to them.
Right, got it. Yeah, you said something very important, and I think small businesses, in fact, you awakened me to the importance of this. Let me tell you what it is. You said, well, a lead is not conversion, but a lead opens the door for a possible from lead to actual customer. So in that connection, Vonzel, in terms of conversion rate, I mean, it's 2%. I mean, what is there a target that a small business or even a large business should look for in terms of converting a lead to an actual customer?
Well, everybody would love 100% conversion, right? So, what we find, and this is very general, but it tends to work pretty well, is most of the people, leads who approach you, will only a little less than 1% will actually need your services right at the time they approach you.
Yeah,
So that leaves there's 99% out there who may want your services, but they aren't ready to take advantage of what you have at that time. And that's when we use things called what we call a drip campaign. And a drip campaign is where I know you may not be ready to do business right now, but I stay in touch with you, whether through email, through newsletters, through phone calls, or whatever. And I stay in touch with you. So when you come around to needing my service, I will have had a rapport with you and a relationship that we build over time. So when you think of using a service or referring the service, it will be me. And so in a drip means you just drip information to the potential client. And that, like I said, you do that in different ways. And one of the things you always do, so let's say a phone call drip program. You call me. Well, you don't want to hear from me all the time. I mean, I call you now, I call you there. But if I know your business and I always call you with good, solid content and information to help your business every time I call, then you're going to associate my business with solutions. Every time I call you, whether you buy something from me or not, I'm always calling you with an advantage to your business. Okay, those are the best type of drip campaigns because the person becomes in your corner. They become the person that says, no matter what, I'm always going to bring you good news about you
yeah,
or help you away from some type of trap or help you with a tax issue or help you with even give you another lead. I may say to you, well, I know you do this business and I know this person that supplies you with this. Well, listen, if I don't mind getting you all together, you might want to look for a better price from them. Well, I didn't really sell you anything at that point, but what I did become is an asset to your business. And therefore, I do that 10, 15 times. When it's time for you to buy something, you're not going to go to someone else. You're going to go where I said where trust is, because where there's trust flow, there's cash flow. And
that's
if you
great.
don't build trust, it's hard to build the cash.
That's great, and that's very important. And what I'm getting here is that there's a business mindset because the uninitiated might say, "You don't buy from me today, forget you." But you're saying something totally different. Continue to build the relationship because the timing of the consumer is not necessarily your timing. So you continue to build a relationship. That's really good. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you stick with people over time, and now what about that 1%? You still have to make money. So
Yeah,
that means you're going to go through a lot of leads
right.
to get to conversions.
Mhm.
And as you go through a lot of leads to get to conversions, even your skill level at building what we call fence sitters starts to get better. In other words, that I was going to buy, but I'm not sure if I'm going to buy right now. And your ability in dealing with people, you start to understand better in your own business psyche. Oh, saying this causes someone to say, I think I'll do it now. So
Yeah,
your 1% starts to build up to 2%, 3%, 4%, and you find more often where you keep a long list of other people, but you're able to convert them later. But the people who are now, you're finding more and more of those people, and you find ways of getting to them. And of course, they talk to other people because they have the experience of the conversion already.
yeah. So the business owner has to be involved with growing and developing as well to better communicate with prospective customers and customers. So I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's the business owner, but that's, the whole goal is not to be the business owner, but
uh,
not the business operator. So at some point, you want to get to a point where you allow yourself to have an operations that allow you to be on top of the business or above it, as opposed to working on it or in it.
Gotcha.
So you work in it first, then you work on it, and then you have to rise above if you really want it to be super profitable, and that's work above your business. And that's when you have a set of operational professionals who are helping you run your business, and you're more looking at it from a more of a CEO or director standpoint.
Okay. All right. So I read something at your website. You called it the 45-minute challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to read what you said, and I want to see if you have any commentary that you care to share with
Sure.
us. Okay, so you're right. I can show any business how to double their leads and sales in less than 45 minutes, all without, and you got emphasis on without, spending a cent on marketing or advertising. Any commentary do you care to add?
Yeah, so we have, and many business coaches know this. We have certain approaches that we use, strategies we call them, that allow us to be able to look at where you are today without spending any more money on advertising or marketing, and be able to take what you have, if you've been in business any time, and help you to increase that, because in most cases there are many things you're not looking at in business that you could take advantage of. A lot of times the pressure of business is you focus on one thing over and over and over because there's all these fires you have to put out. And what I do help people do is I show them how to utilize what's already there that they're not able to utilize, that they didn't know about. They just didn't have the right type of business network among themselves to be able to talk to. So that's a big thing that we're able to do right away. So let's talk about some of those strategies. One of those strategies that I tell a business right away, to talk to their accountant or their CPA or someone and say, how are you in business? And they say, well, I'm an LLC, okay, which is a limited liability company. And most of all our 50 states allow incorporation, or what we call organization of an LLC. Incorporation is that for corporations, but an LLC. And it's a what we call a pass-through type of organization, where it's really good for small businesses to start with. And I'm not saying that's the one they should. I'm saying they should absolutely check with their CPA, accountant, or attorney. But there are advantages to that. And those that are LLCs, they start that because they hear from some advertisement or something like that, or a friend, or maybe they hear from a CPA or an attorney. That's what they should do. So let's say they start the LLC. But most people don't know what you are with the state and what you are with the IRS can be two different things. So you can have an LLC and decide to be taxed by the IRS as a subchapter S corporation. In other words, your tax treatment is different from the organization you have with the state. And again, check with your CPA or your attorney or anyone, and that's kind of my disclaimer there.
Okay.
But you're able to then find out that your self-employment tax uh, goes away, and that's a tax you would normally have to pay every year. Well, you've now increased your cash flow by that amount. So I've already helped you increase your cash flow from a tax situation standpoint, and you didn't spend any more money on advertising or anything.
Wow.
Okay, the your P&L statement. We look at your cost of goods sold, which are any labor or material you use to make the sale, as opposed to your overhead, which are your monthly expenses, regardless of whether you make a sale or not, like your rent and utilities. Such things as that. In a cost of goods sold in a place where I manufacture something, I have to have the raw goods to put in place to manufacture. So we show someone in business how they can use different strategies to help them in that regard. So, for instance, let's say people owe them money. Okay, that's an accounts receivable thing. They look at their balance sheet for that, and they say, "Well, my account, these many people owe money to me." Okay, well, at some point, it no longer is worth it because as it cannot be collected, the chances of it being collected go down. So therefore, what I'm able to do instead of waiting till it gets past due, I can offer an incentive for if you pay it early
Mm.
or if you pay it on time. Okay? Now that's cash I receive that I didn't pay any more on marketing or advertising for. Let's talk about cost of goods sold real quickly. Let's say I have a supplier who supplies me one item. Well, there's one supplier, there's two suppliers. If I tell a supplier, well, I really like you because your prices are good, but I need a better strategy cash flow for myself. Can I get my supplies with a 60 day payment schedule, which means I'm not going to pay you in 30 or 45 days, but net 60. Your supplier goes, okay, that'll work for me. You've done business with me for a while. You've paid me on time. Let's go to a net 60. Now I've elongated my cash flow situation where I don't have to pay that out every 30 days, every 15 days, or something like that. Those are strategies and ways which we're able to do things a lot better. One last one. Let's talk about our revenue. Okay, I'm a florist. I sell a dozen roses for $50. Okay, but I have a lot of people come to me and they don't have $50. Well, I have something called a downsell. A downsell says I'll sell you that same roses, but a half a dozen for $25. Well, shucks, people didn't know I could do that, you know? So it's up to me to go to where their mind may be in a better situation according to the money they have. And because buying 25 for half a dozen versus 50 for a dozen is really the same thing. But I'm
Right.
making it apparent to you that I have a way of doing that. And that's called a downsell.
Yeah.
That's probably three or four strategies out of maybe 50 to 70 strategies
Oh,
that
I
could be
love
used without people spending more money on marketing or advertising.
love it, especially the downside because you can sell more units and make the same amount of money anyway. So
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just as I tell people, my greatest superpower is being what I call the whisperer. And they said, "What do you mean by whisperer?" Well, let's say you're playing a game of chess or checkers, or if you're in Japan, you're playing Go, or if you're in other places, you're playing mahjong. It doesn't matter. It allows you in the game to have somebody to whisper in your ear. Have you noticed that over there?
Okay.
And
Well,
they're
look,
able. I didn't see it, but it's not that they just weren't able to focus on it. So many times, what I allow people to do is run things past me, get feedback. In most cases, they come up with the answer. They just needed a space to think, to imagine, to consider, to come to conclusions.
okay. Well, look, you're a great strategist. So I have two more things for you.
Okay.
One is a real event that's happening now, and I'm going to ask her to listen at least to this part of this podcast to get your answer. She's well educated. She has a master's degree, has been with the company for, had been with her company for a long time. But her and her company parted on ways that were not very pleasant. Here's a person that's competent, that's skilled, well educated, but right now she's feeling I will not be able to get a good recommendation from this company as I move forward. Am I stuck? What would you say to her?
Well, no, because your company loomed very large in your purview because you spent a lot of time there, you spent a lot of interaction there. A big part of your life was with that corporation. What you have to do is take the averse of that or inverse of that and say, where else was my life spent? Who else did I spend my time among? Where else did I have an impact besides that company? And you began to say, let me not focus on where I was, but let me focus on the inverse of that and decide that there is all these other places. I did things with my kids. I did things with school. I did things with my husband. I did things within my family. I did things within my community. And start looking at that and saying, okay, that's where I probably need to look at and to pioneer and go in that direction. Now let's go back to the business side of it. Let's say I did this business with this company, but I also did business with other companies that did business with my company. Let's look at what their thoughts were about me. Let's look at the times they gave me great accolades and things like that, where I'm now able to say, man, there was something there. There were other relationships that I had outside of the company that dealt with business and things like that. And now it's time to either use those networks. They sometimes we don't think that they're networks, but they actually are. It's time to use those networks I have, the cousins, the family, the neighborhood, the other businesses that I dealt with, and start to rebuild my own business and professional self esteem so that I now can look for the things I never saw before and the opportunities I saw before. So it's a mindset change. It's kind of looking at a gym. If you watch it from above, you'll notice the different lines of a diamond. But if you see it from the side or diagonally, you're going to see totally different things. Still same diamond. Your view of looking at it is just different. So this person can go on to become other things and actually begin to be glad that they now are parted from that company because now it opens up great opportunities for them.
That's fantastic. I'll make sure that she gets this. Let's
Okay.
got a couple of fun questions for you based on your CV that you sent me. I know that back in the day you were an actor on stage in a play that was entitled Three Blind Saints. What was that about? And how did you like that experience?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was working at the time and I was able to take off some time to. I had a friend who was a pastor and he was putting a film together. And I didn't even know about it. And all of a sudden, he has the casting person called me and said, "Hey, you'd be great for this part." And I'm like, "What part of what?" And they tell me about a comedy that they're doing, a Christian-based comedy called Three Blind Saints, and it was a fantastic experience. I got to work with if I don't know if you remember the movie called Soul Food.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, well, the lady who played Big Mama
Uh-huh.
in Soul Food, I got to a chance to act with her.
Oh, look at
Uh,
that.
I acted with people who were cast in shows like Supernatural, and there was a really famous guy who did a lot of Pepsi commercials and things like that. And there were just a good amount of other people that I got a chance, and of course I had my speaking parts and things like that. It was a lot of fun. In fact, I had the gentleman who was like a one of the coaches for Robert De Niro, who was a part of teaching the actors workshop that we had to go into before we could get into it. And it's so funny because he came to me and he said, "You could have a good, career in this business." And after that one experience, I said, "No, I don't think so," because and it's not that it wasn't fun, but you have to do those things over and over and over and film for the editors to do what they need to do. And, I thought of it just like I think about music. I love music, but could I sing my same song for years and years on a stage? Absolutely not. I'd be so tired of the song, I'd have to stop. So I could never have a good fan base in that area because they're saying he doesn't even like his own song anymore or his own acting. So I decided, what a great experience, what a wonderful, and now I have a what do you call it? I never started out with acting or anything. This was just something that I did, and now I have one of those IMDb records now because it was
Wow.
actually a film that that the Actors Guild and everything. Now, luckily, I didn't have to become a part of the Actors Guild or anything, but it was something, and it was really weird. I'll tell you, Stephen. The weird part was when all these people are represented by agents and things, and I wasn't represented by any. So they're trying to figure out how in the world did you even get in here. So it's just one of those things that
Right. Yeah.
God provided. The executive producer said this guy would be great for it, and
Right.
and everybody else thought so too. So and that was very fortunate for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a skill set that you have, whether you use it or not. That's one of your gifts. Hey, another funny question for you, real fun, and you don't have to respond to this.
No, you're fine.
Stephen is regular. Stephen is regular name. John is regular. But I can see you in third grade. My name is Vonzel. Any there must be a story behind Vonzel. You're the first Vonzel I've ever
You
met.
know, it's so funny that you say that. I asked my mother because, of course, you have to start with the origin of, and she said, "Well, I was reading a book, a French book, where one of the characters was named Vonzel, and I was in labor at that time. I thought, what a great name." And I said, "Okay," because my sister's name was Veronica. So we were starting up. My mother was and my father were into V's.
Mhm.
So as a result, she found that from a whatever she was reading at that time. I never learned the name of the book, but she loved that name, so that's how I came out with the name. So I guess I would tell all mothers, if you need a different name, read different books while you're in labor,
That's
and
great.
it will have an impact on you.
And that's a nice story. I knew it was a story behind that name. That's wonderful. Well, Vonzel, is there anything else you care to share that I have not asked, that we have not talked about?
Yeah, I think the thing that one thing I would want to share, especially for those who are in business and believe in they have a Christian worldview and everything. The one thing I would tell them is this: is make sure that your business and your church do business together. But more than that, make sure that your church becomes a catalyst for bringing business together and doing business in their communities. There are so many points of pain in our communities that it doesn't do any good to do what other churches are doing. Find out where there is an actual issue or problem or challenge. And I believe, in my belief, I believe that the Holy Spirit, that God will actually show you how to address that through business and through other means as well, to show forth his light, because there's no need to show light where there is no darkness.
Mm.
But where there is a darkness in a challenge or an issue of a community, that's the place where you're supposed to work. And if you say we're not equipped, we don't know, we don't understand, well, that's part of the journey. Getting to know, getting to understand, becoming more equipped. And believe me, if it was for us to receive the glory, then it wouldn't be about us being in that community. It's about him receiving glory, and as a result, us being able to have the fortune to be able to be included in that solution with him. So that's one thing I would say. I would say the other thing I would say about business is it's okay to start your businesses, and I think that's really great. But I want to show you a better way of doing that. Instead of starting businesses, find the inability in yourself to aggregate with others, come together with others, and buy businesses that are already in place. There are a lot of minority and others who are in business today, and they're not sure what to do with their business. They may not have children to pass it on to, or they have an interest in the business later, but they want to see what they've worked hard for continue. So, in many cases, that say, don't start a business, find a way to take over a business and learn it, because if it's been around a while, it's been successful. Most businesses, and they say in the first 5 years, a good portion of those businesses don't succeed. Well, look at the ones that do succeed and attempt to take them over. That's actually a better way to go in the business than necessarily starting something. So
Wow.
that's kind of the final words I would say about that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. Vonzel, this has been my pleasure. I knew when I heard you the first time, I knew I wanted you to have you on our podcast, and you delivered. Thank you again.
It's certainly a blessing to me. And Stephen, I love your name, Possibility Action, Possibility Man. I love that. That is just great, and allows for good questions and imagination of what's possible.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, thanks. Well, you have been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast.